I still remember the exact moment I realized my best friend was going to destroy me. We were standing in the fabrication lab of our shared workshop, surrounded by half-finished motorcycle parts and the smell of metal shavings. And Marcus was smiling at me the way he always did, wide, genuine, the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the world who mattered. He had his hand on my shoulder, congratulating me on landing the Vanguard Motors contract, the deal that would finally put our custom motorcycle shop on the map after 7 years of grinding it out in this industrial park on the edge of Austin. "This is it, brother," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "This is what we've been working toward, you and me. We're going to be legends." I was 34 years old, and I believed him completely. My name is Daniel Cortez, and I'm a custom motorcycle fabricator. Not the kind who bolts on aftermarket parts and calls it custom. I mean real fabrication. I design and build motorcycles from the frame up, one-off machines that blend engineering precision with artistic vision. It's a craft I learned from my father, who learned it from his father, back when motorcycles were still considered working-class transportation, rather than luxury toys for weekend warriors. Marcus Webb had been my best friend since high school. We met in auto shop class, two kids who didn't quite fit in with the college prep crowd, who found common ground in our love of machines and our shared dream of building something that mattered. After graduation, while our classmates scattered to universities across the country, Marcus and I pooled our savings, his from working construction, mine from my father's modest life insurance policy after he passed, and opened Webb & Cortez Custom Cycles. The name order was Marcus's idea. "Webb comes before Cortez alphabetically," he'd said. "Sounds more professional that way." I hadn't cared about the name order, I cared about the work. For 7 years we built that business together. Marcus handled the customer relations, the marketing, the business development. I handled the actual fabrication, the design work, the engineering that turned sketches into functional art. It was a partnership that made sense. Marcus was the face, I was the hands. He could charm anyone, convince them that our shop could deliver their dream machine. I could actually deliver it. The Vanguard Motors contract was supposed to be our breakthrough. Vanguard was a boutique automotive company that had recently pivoted into the electric motorcycle market. They wanted someone to design and fabricate a limited run of high-end electric bikes. 20 units, fully custom, each one unique. The contract was worth $300,000, more money than Webb & Cortez had ever seen in a single deal. I had spent 3 months on the proposal. The design portfolio alone was 70 pages of technical drawings, material specifications, and aesthetic concepts. I'd worked 18-hour days, barely sleeping, surviving on coffee, and the vision of what these machines could become. Marcus had helped with the presentation, the pitch deck, the business projections. When we finally presented to Vanguard's executive team, I could see the moment they fell in love with the designs. The lead executive, a woman named Patricia Huang, had actually gasped when I showed her the renderings of the flagship model. "This is exactly what we've been looking for," she'd said. "This is going to redefine what people think electric motorcycles can be." The contract came through 2 weeks later. Marcus and I celebrated at our usual bar, a dive place called Rosie's, where the bartender knew our orders and the jukebox still played vinyl. We got drunk on cheap whiskey and expensive dreams, talking about how this was just the beginning, how Vanguard would lead to other contracts, how we'd finally be able to move out of our cramped industrial space into a real, flagship showroom. To partnership, Marcus had said, raising his glass. To partnership, I'd echoed. I didn't know then that Marcus had already decided I was expendable. The fabrication work began in January. I threw myself into it with the kind of obsessive focus that had always defined my relationship with craft. Each bike in the Vanguard series was going to be unique, but they all needed to share certain DNA, a recognizable aesthetic language, a common technical foundation. I started with the flagship model, the one Patricia Huang had responded to most strongly. Marcus seemed distracted during this period, which wasn't usual. He'd always been less interested in the actual fabrication process, more focused on the business side. He spent a lot of time on phone calls, in meetings with potential clients, building relationships. I appreciated that he handled that side of things. It freed me to focus on what I did best. But looking back, I can see the signs I missed. The way he'd quickly close his laptop when I walked into the office, the hushed phone conversations that would end abruptly when I entered a room. The new designer clothes, the expensive watch, the sudden upgrades to his lifestyle that seemed inconsistent with our business's actual finances. I was too focused on the work to pay attention. That was always my weakness. When I got locked into a project, the rest of the world faded into background noise. In March, about 2 months into the Vanguard fabrication, Marcus came to me with a proposal. "I've been thinking about the business structure," he said. We were in the office, a small room adjacent to the main workshop. He was sitting across from me, that familiar smile on his face. "We should consider bringing in a partner, someone with capital, someone who can help us scale." I looked up from the technical drawing I was working on. "Scale? Marcus, we can barely handle the Vanguard contract. I'm working 16-hour days as it is." That's exactly my point. We need to hire more fabricators, expand the team, but to do that we need capital. And I found someone who's interested in investing. "Who?" "Guy named Richard Thornton. He runs a private equity fund that specializes in boutique manufacturing businesses. He's impressed with what we've built, thinks we have serious growth potential." I set down my pencil. "What kind of investment are we talking about?" He'd put in $500,000. In exchange, he'd take a 30% stake in the company. I did the math quickly. Webb and Cortez was split 50-50 between us. If we brought in Thornton at 30%, Marcus and I would each drop to 35%. We'd still have majority control, but just barely. "I don't know, Marcus. Bringing in outside money changes the dynamic. We'd have someone else we'd need to answer to." "We'd have resources," Marcus countered. "Real resources. Daniel, think about what we could do with that kind of capital. We could upgrade our equipment, expand the space, hire a full team. We could take on multiple contracts at once instead of putting all our eggs in one basket." "I like our basket," I said. "I like that we control our own destiny." Marcus leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I get it, brother. I really do, but the Vanguard contract isn't going to last forever. 20 bikes, and then what? We need to think about the future. We need to think about sustainability." He was making sense, and that was the problem. Marcus always made sense. He had a way of presenting arguments that seemed logical, reasonable, inevitable. "Let me meet him," I said finally. "This Thornton guy, let me see what he's about before we make any decisions." "Absolutely," Marcus said, his smile widening. "I'll set it up." Richard Thornton turned out to be exactly what you'd expect from a private equity guy. Mid-40s, expensive suit, teeth Too white to be natural, handshake too firm to be genuine. We met at an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind of place where the menu doesn't list prices and the waiters treat you like you're attending a religious ceremony. Thornton talked a lot about value propositions and market positioning and scalability metrics. He praised our craftsmanship, called the Vanguard designs truly exceptional, said he saw tremendous potential in our brand. He made all the right noises. But there was something about him I didn't trust. Maybe it was the way his eyes never quite matched his smile. Maybe it was the way he talked about our motorcycles like they were just widgets, products to be manufactured and sold at scale rather than individual works of art. Maybe it was the way he and Marcus seemed to have their own shorthand, finishing each other's sentences, laughing at references I didn't understand. "So what do you think?" Marcus asked me afterward, as we walked back to his car. "I think he sees us as an investment opportunity, not a partnership." That's literally what he is, Daniel. An investor. You know what I mean? He doesn't care about the craft, he cares about the return. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face me. "And what's wrong with that? Daniel, we've been grinding it out for 7 years, barely scraping by, putting every cent back into the business. Don't you want to actually make some money? Don't you want to build something that lasts?" "I want to build motorcycles that matter," I said. "I want to maintain creative control. I want to make sure that when someone sees a Webb and Cortez bike, they know it represents something real, something authentic. We can do all of that with Thornton's money. We can do it better, actually, because we'll have the resources to do it right." I studied my best friend's face, trying to read what was really going on behind his eyes. "Why do I feel like you've already made up your mind about this?" "Because I have," Marcus said simply. "I think it's the right move, but I won't do it without you. We're 50-50 partners, Daniel. We make decisions together. If you say no, it's no." That should have been my first real warning. The fact that he'd clearly already committed to the idea, already built a relationship with Thornton, already started planning a future that I wasn't part of shaping. But I didn't see it then. I just saw my best friend, my partner, asking me to trust him. "Let me think about it," I said. "Take all the time you need," Marcus replied. I thought about it for a week. I ran the numbers, considered the possibilities, weighed the risks, and ultimately, I convinced myself that Marcus was right. We did need capital to grow. We did need to think about the future beyond the Vanguard contract. And 30% stake for $500,000 of investment wasn't unreasonable. I told Marcus, yes, the paperwork was drawn up quickly. Too quickly in retrospect. Thornton's lawyers had everything ready within 48 hours, as if they'd been preparing the documents before I'd even agreed. We signed on a Tuesday afternoon in April. Marcus, Thornton, and me sitting in a lawyer's office, signing away a piece of something we'd built from nothing. "To the future of Webb and Cortez," Thornton said, raising a glass of champagne the lawyer had produced for the occasion. "To the future," Marcus echoed. I raised my glass but didn't say anything. I was already having second thoughts. The change was subtle at first. Thornton started showing up at the shop more frequently, always with suggestions, always with ideas about how we could optimize our processes. Marcus seemed to encourage this involvement, treating Thornton's input with a deference that felt wrong. When I pushed back on some of Thornton's suggestions, particularly ones that would have compromised the quality of our fabrication, Marcus would pull me aside and ask me to be reasonable, to consider the business perspective. We have an investor now, Marcus would say. We need to make sure he sees returns. We need to show him we're serious about growth. We are serious, I'd counter. We're delivering the Vanguard contract on time and on budget. That's serious. You know what I mean? But I didn't, not really. What I knew was that something fundamental had shifted in our partnership, and I couldn't quite name what it was. In May, I finished the flagship Vanguard motorcycle. It was beautiful, a perfect synthesis of classic motorcycle aesthetics and modern electric technology. The frame was hand-welded chromoly steel, the body panels were hand-formed aluminum, and the electric drivetrain was integrated so seamlessly that you couldn't tell from looking at it that it wasn't a traditional combustion engine. I'd spent 3 months on this single bike, and it was the best work I'd ever done. Patricia Huang came to the shop to see it in person. She walked around the bike 3 times, not saying anything, just looking. Then she turned to me with tears in her eyes. "This is extraordinary, Daniel. This is beyond what I imagined. This is art." I felt a pride so intense it almost hurt. This was why I did the work. This was what mattered. Marcus was there too, of course, smiling his big smile, shaking Patricia's hand, thanking her for the opportunity, but I noticed he kept glancing at his phone, distracted, like there was somewhere else he needed to be. After Patricia left, Marcus pulled me aside. "We need to talk about something," he said. "What's up?" "Thornton thinks we should consider licensing your designs." I stared at him. "What?" "Licensing, selling the intellectual property rights to your designs to larger manufacturers who could produce them at scale. It could be a major revenue stream, Daniel. Passive income while we focus on the custom work." "No, Daniel, no, absolutely not. These designs are meant to be one-of-a-kind pieces, not mass-produced commodities. That completely defeats the purpose of what we do." Marcus's expression hardened slightly. "What we do is run a business, and businesses need to make money. We make money by doing excellent custom work. We make money by building a reputation for uncompromising quality. We don't make money by selling out to the highest bidder. That's not what licensing is. That's exactly what it is." And the answer is no. We stood there in the workshop, the finished Vanguard bike between us, and for the first time in 7 years of partnership, I saw something in Marcus's eyes that scared me. It wasn't anger, it was calculation. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay, if that's how you feel." "It is." "Then we won't pursue it." But he didn't sound like he meant it. 2 weeks later, I found the first document. I'd been looking for the Vanguard contract in Marcus's filing cabinet. We kept all our major contracts there, and I needed to reference a specification detail. The cabinet was unlocked, as was it usually was. Marcus and I had always operated on trust. We'd never hidden anything from each other. Until now. Tucked in the back of the Vanguard folder was a document I didn't recognize. It was a licensing agreement between Webb and Cortez Custom Cycles and a manufacturing company called Apex Production Systems. The agreement granted Apex the rights to reproduce my Vanguard designs at scale with a royalty structure that would pay Webb and Cortez 15% of gross revenues. The document was dated 3 days ago. It bore Marcus's signature and mine. Except I'd never signed it. I'd never even seen it before this moment. My hands started shaking as I read through the pages. The signature was good, really good. If I hadn't known with absolute certainty that I'd never signed this document, I might have believed it was genuine. but it wasn't. Someone had forged my signature. Marcus had forged my signature. I stood there in the office for a long time, holding that document, feeling the foundation of my entire world crack beneath my feet. 7 years. 7 years of partnership, of friendship, of building something together. And he'd forged my signature on a licensing deal that violated everything I believed about our work. I heard the shop door open. Marcus's voice called out, "Daniel, you here?" I walked out of the office with the document in my hand. Marcus saw it immediately. His expression flickered just for a second before settling back into that familiar smile. "Hey, I can explain that." "You forged my signature." "Daniel, just listen." "You forged my fucking signature, Marcus." The smile disappeared. "I did it for us, for the business. You wouldn't see reason, so I had to make the decision that would keep us viable." "Viable?" "We have a $300,000 contract that we're delivering on. We're more than viable for now. But what about next year? What about 5 years from now? Daniel, the Apex deal could bring in millions, millions, and all we have to do is let them manufacture your designs. You'd still get to do the custom work. Nothing would change. Everything would change. My designs would become mass market products. The entire point of what we do, the entire point of our business, is that we create unique individual pieces of functional art, not products, not widgets. Art. Art doesn't pay the bills, Daniel. Art doesn't build a sustainable business. It's paid the bills for 7 years. Marcus's expression hardened. Barely. We barely scrape by. I'm tired of scraping by. I'm tired of living paycheck to paycheck while you obsess over every weld joint and paint finish. I want more than that. I deserve more than that. Then start your own business. This one was built on a specific vision, a specific set of values. You don't get to unilaterally change that. Actually, Marcus said quietly, I do. Thornton and I together hold 51% of the company. We can make decisions without you. The words hit me like a physical blow. You planned this, the investment, the equity structure. You planned this from the beginning. Marcus didn't deny it. I planned for growth. I planned for success. I'm sorry you can't see that. Get out. What? Get out of the shop. Now, before I do something we'll both regret. Marcus studied me for a long moment, and I could see him calculating, weighing his options. Then he shrugged. Fine. But Daniel, you should probably talk to a lawyer, because that licensing agreement is happening with or without your blessing. And if you try to fight it, Thornton and I will vote you out entirely. You'll get bought out at fair market value, and you'll have no say in what happens to your designs. He walked out of the shop, leaving me standing there with the forged document in my hands. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the workshop, surrounded by tools and half-finished motorcycle parts, trying to figure out how I'd been so blind. The signs had all been there. Marcus's increasing distance from the actual craft, his obsession with scaling and growth, his willingness to bring in Thornton despite my reservations, the way he'd pressured me to agree to the investment. I'd been so focused on the work that I'd missed the betrayal happening right in front of me. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to fight this through lawyers and courts. Legal battles were expensive and uncertain, and even if I won, I'd be locked in partnership with someone who'd proven he couldn't be trusted. There had to be another way. I needed leverage. Real leverage. Something that would give me control over the situation. And then I remembered something I hadn't thought about in months. when my father died, he'd left me more than just money for the business. He'd left me his notebooks, decades worth of design work, fabrication techniques, engineering innovations that he'd developed over his career but never commercialized. I'd glanced through them when I first inherited them, but I'd been young and arrogant, convinced I needed to forge my own path rather than follow in his footsteps. Now I pulled those notebooks out of storage and started reading them with new eyes. My father had been a genius, a quiet genius who'd never sought recognition, who'd been content to work in obscurity, but a genius nonetheless. His notebooks contained fabrication techniques I'd never seen anywhere else, design innovations that were decades ahead of their time. He'd developed a proprietary method for integrating electric drivetrains into traditional motorcycle frames, the exact technique I'd used for the Vanguard bikes. The technique I'd always assumed I'd invented myself, but I hadn't. I'd unconsciously absorbed it from my father's notebooks years ago and then forgotten the source. The innovation that made the Vanguard bike special, the thing that had made Patricia Huang gasp when she saw the designs, it wasn't mine, it was my father's, and I had the documentation to prove it. I spent the next 3 days going through every notebook, every sketch, every technical diagram. I documented everything, photographed every page, created a comprehensive archive of my father's work. And then I did something that felt both brilliant and slightly insane. I filed for a patent, not on my designs, on my father's technique for electric drivetrain integration, the technique that made those designs possible in the first place. Patent law is complex, but the basic principle is simple. Whoever files first wins. My father had never filed patents on his work. He'd seen patents as antithetical to the collaborative spirit of craftsmanship. But I wasn't my father, and I was willing to use every tool available to protect what mattered. The patent application was provisional, which meant it would take months to process. But it established a filing date, a legal claim to the intellectual property. And more importantly, it gave me leverage. I didn't tell Marcus about the patent. Instead, I continued working on the Vanguard bikes, delivering each one on schedule, maintaining professional relations with Patricia Huang and the Vanguard team. I showed up at the shop every day, did my work, and acted like nothing had changed. Marcus seemed relieved by my apparent capitulation. He started talking about the Apex deal openly, about how the licensing revenues would set us up for life, about how I'd eventually see this was the right decision. I nodded and smiled and said nothing. Thornton came by the shop more frequently, treating me with a kind of condescending friendliness that made my skin crawl. He'd put his hand on my shoulder and talk about the bigger picture, about how artisans like me needed business people like him and Marcus to succeed in the modern economy. I let him talk. I smiled. I waited. In July, the Apex deal went through. A press release went out, announcing the partnership, praising the visionary collaboration between Webb & Cortez Custom Cycles and Apex Production Systems. The release included images of my Vanguard designs, along with quotes from Marcus about bringing premium motorcycle design to a wider audience. My phone blew up with messages from people in the custom motorcycle community. Some were congratulatory. Others were disappointed, even angry, accusing me of selling out. I didn't respond to any of them. I just kept working. The licensing payment started flowing in August. The first check was for $50,000, 10% of Apex's initial production run revenues. Marcus deposited it into the business account without consulting me. When I didn't protest, he seemed to relax even further. "See," he said, "this is what I've been talking about. Passive income. We're making money while we sleep." "While you sleep," I corrected. "I'm still working 16-hour days, finishing the Vanguard contract. You know what I mean?" I knew exactly what he meant. In September, I received confirmation that my provisional patent had been accepted for full examination. The USPTO had reviewed my father's notebooks and confirmed that the electric drivetrain integration technique represented a novel and non-obvious innovation worthy of patent protection. I had my leverage. I waited until October. The final Vanguard bike was complete, the contract fulfilled, the payment received. Patricia Huang had been so impressed with the work that she'd mentioned wanting to discuss a second contract, a new series of bikes for the following year. Marcus was already planning how to handle that with Thornton's input. On a Tuesday morning, I walked into the shop with a folder full of documents. Marcus was in the office, reviewing financials on his laptop. He looked up when I entered. "Morning, Daniel." "Morning. We need to talk." "Sure, what's up?" I set the folder on the desk in front of him. "I filed a patent on the electric drivetrain integration technique, the technique that makes the Vanguard designs work." Marcus's smile faltered. "What?" "The technique is based on my father's research. I have documentation going back 30 years proving he developed it. The patent's mine, which means the Vanguard designs are derivative works based on patented technology." "You can't do that." "I already did. The patent was granted preliminary approval last month. It should be finalized within 60 days. Marcus's face had gone pale. "But, the Apex deal, the licensing agreement, is invalid. Apex is manufacturing motorcycles based on patented technology they don't have rights to. As the patent holder, I could sue them for infringement. I could shut down their entire production run." "Daniel, you're being crazy. This is insane." "What's insane is forging your partner's signature on a licensing deal. What's insane is selling out the principles our business was built on for a quick profit." Marcus stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You're going to destroy everything we've built." "You already did that when you betrayed me." "I didn't betray you. I tried to help you see reason, tried to help this business succeed, and you were too stubborn, too precious about your art to see the opportunity. The opportunity to turn unique works of craftsmanship into mass-produced product. Yeah, I saw it. I just saw it for what it was, a betrayal of everything we're supposed to stand for." Marcus was breathing hard now, his hands clenched into fists. "So what? You're going to sue Apex, tank the licensing deal?" "I'm going to give you a choice. You and Thornton can buy me out at 3 times fair market value, or I file the infringement lawsuit tomorrow. Apex will have to halt production immediately. They'll sue you for damages, and this whole house of cards you've built collapses." 3 times market value? That's extortion. That's the price of forgery and betrayal. Consider it a bargain. Marcus stared at me, his expression cycling through anger, fear, calculation. "I'll need to talk to Thornton." "You have 24 hours. I walked out of the office, leaving him with the folder full of patent documents and the consequences of his choices. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I didn't know if Marcus would call my bluff, if Thornton had enough liquid capital to meet my price, if they'd try some legal maneuver I hadn't anticipated. I played my hand, and now I had to wait. Marcus called at 11:47 p.m. that night. "We'll do it," he said. His voice was flat, defeated. 3 times market value, but we need 90 days to liquidate the necessary assets. 60 days, and I want it in writing, signed by both you and Thornton by tomorrow morning. You're really going to walk away from everything we built? You walked away from it first, Marcus. You just didn't realize I'd notice. He hung up without saying goodbye. The buyout agreement arrived at my lawyer's office the next morning. It was clean, straightforward. They'd pay me $900,000 for my 35% stake in Webb & Cortez, with the full amount due within 60 days. In exchange, I would transfer my share of the company to Marcus and Thornton, and I would retain all rights to my father's patented technology, which I would license to Webb & Cortez for use in any motorcycles currently under contract, but which would not extend to future licensing deals with third parties. It was a total capitulation on their part. Marcus had probably had to convince Thornton to drain his investment fund to make the numbers work, but they had no choice. If I filed the infringement lawsuit, Apex would come after them for damages and the whole business would collapse in litigation. I signed the papers. 60 days later, the money hit my account. $900,000, more than I'd made in my entire career up to that point. I immediately sent Marcus a one-sentence email. Contract fulfilled. You'll have my final personal items out of the shop by end of week. I didn't go back to clean out my workspace. I hired a moving company to do it. I couldn't bear to see the shop again, to walk through the space where I'd spent 7 years building something I believed in, only to watch it get corrupted into everything I'd tried to avoid. For a few weeks after the buyout, I felt unmoored. I'd defined myself through my work for so long that without it, I didn't know who I was. I'd wake up at 5 a.m., ready to go to the shop, before remembering I didn't have a shop anymore. I'd sketch designs in my notebook, then realize I had no way to fabricate them. But I still had my father's notebooks, and I still had $900,000. In November, I signed a lease on a new workshop space, smaller than what Marcus and I had shared, but it was mine, fully mine. I bought used equipment, set up a fabrication area, created a small design studio. I didn't have a business partner. I didn't have investors. I had myself, my skills, and my father's legacy. I named the new shop Cortez Fabrication. No ampersand, no partnership, just me. Word spread quickly in the custom motorcycle community that I'd left Webb and Cortez. People reached out, some curious, some supportive, some just wanting gossip. I kept my responses brief and professional. What had happened with Marcus was between us. I didn't need to air it publicly. Patricia Huang called me in December. "I heard you're on your own now," she said. "I am." "Good, because I want to talk to you about something. Vanguard is planning a new series for next year. Fully custom electric bikes, higher end than the current line. I want you to design and fabricate them. Just you. No partners, no licensing deals. The real thing." "What about Webb and Cortez? Don't you have a contract with them?" "We did, but the quality's already declining. Marcus outsourced the fabrication on the last few bikes from our first series to Apex, trying to save money. I can tell the difference. Hell, anyone can tell the difference. I want the quality I saw in those first bikes. I want what you can do when you're not being held back." I closed my eyes, feeling something warm and painful and good spread through my chest. "When do you want to start?" "January. I'll send you a proposal by end of week." After I hung up, I sat in my new workshop for a long time, looking at the empty space, the tools waiting to be used, the possibility of starting fresh. It felt terrifying and liberating in equal measure. I'd lost my business partner, I'd lost my best friend, I'd lost 7 years of shared history and effort, but I'd kept my integrity and I'd kept my craft. In January, I signed the new Vanguard contract, a 2-year deal to produce 40 custom electric motorcycles, each one unique, each one bearing my full creative vision, without compromise. The contract was worth $1.2 million. More importantly, it was mine. I threw myself into the work with a focus and freedom I'd never experienced before. Without Marcus second-guessing my design choices, without Thornton pushing for cost-cutting measures, without the constant tension between artistic vision and business pragmatism, I could finally create exactly what I wanted to create. The bikes I built for this new Vanguard series were different from the first generation. They were bolder, more experimental, less concerned with market appeal, and more focused on pushing the boundaries of what a motorcycle could be. Patricia gave me complete creative freedom, and I used it. By March, I completed the first 3 bikes. Patricia came to see them, and when she walked into the workshop, her reaction was even stronger than it had been with the flagship bike from the original series. "These are museum pieces," she said quietly. "Daniel, these belong in a museum." "They belong on the road," I countered. "They're meant to be ridden." "Then whoever rides them is going to feel like they're riding art." That's the idea. I didn't hear much about Webb and Cortez during this period. I'd unfollowed their social media, stopped checking in on their website, deliberately created distance from anything connected to Marcus. But the custom motorcycle world is small, and news travels. In April, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Apex had cancelled their licensing deal with Webb and Cortez. Apparently, the quality control issues on the manufactured bikes had become so severe that Apex was facing customer complaints and potential recalls. Marcus had tried to personally oversee the manufacturing process, but he didn't have the technical knowledge to maintain the standards I'd established. The bikes that rolled off Apex's production line looked superficially like my designs, but they lacked the precision and craftsmanship that made the originals special. Without the licensing revenue, Webb and Cortez's financial situation became precarious. Thornton had apparently sunk most of his liquid capital into buying me out, expecting the Apex deal to replenish those funds. When the deal collapsed, the money stopped flowing. In June, I heard that Marcus had laid off the 2 junior fabricators he'd hired to replace me. He was trying to handle all the custom work himself, but he'd never been as skilled at fabrication. He was the ideas guy, the salesman, the face of the operation. Without me doing the actual technical work, Webb and Cortez was just a brand without substance. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing this news. I felt sad. Sad that it had come to this. Sad that Marcus had thrown away our partnership for a quick profit that never materialized. Sad that 7 years of shared work had ended in such complete mutual destruction. But I didn't feel guilty. I'd given Marcus a choice, and he'd made it. Consequences were his to own. In July, Marcus called me. It was the first direct contact we'd had since the buyout. "Daniel." "Marcus." A long silence. Then, "I fucked up." "Yeah, you did. The business is failing. Thornton's pulling out. I'm probably going to have to declare bankruptcy by the end of the year." I didn't say anything. I wanted you to know that you were right about the licensing, about maintaining creative control, about everything. I thought I was being smart, being business savvy, but I was just being greedy. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I owed you an apology, a real one, not a justification or an excuse, just, I'm sorry I forged your signature." I'm sorry I brought in Thornton behind your back. I'm sorry I prioritized money over our partnership. I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window of my workshop at the Austin skyline. Do you remember what you said to me the night we opened the business, the toast you made? Not really. You said, to building something that matters. That's what you said, and you meant it, I think. Back then, you actually meant it. I did mean it. What happened, Marcus? When did it stop being about building something that mattered and start being about just making money? Another long silence. Then, I don't know, somewhere along the way, I started measuring success differently, started comparing myself to other people who were making more money, driving better cars, living in nicer houses, and I convinced myself that financial success was the same as meaningful success. But it's not. But it's not, he agreed. I know that now, too late, but I know it. What are you going to do? Close the business, sell off the equipment, try to pay back as much of Thornton's investment as I can, though I'll probably only get him about 30 cents on the dollar. Then, I don't know, start over, I guess. Maybe get a job at a regular shop, learn to be a fabricator for real, instead of just pretending I could do what you do. You could do it if you committed to it. You were never bad at the work, Marcus. You just never cared about it enough to get really good. Yeah, that was always the problem, wasn't it? You cared more than I did. We sat there in silence for a moment, two former best friends on opposite ends of a phone line, separated by betrayal and consequences and choices that couldn't be unmade. For what it's worth, Marcus said finally, I'm glad you got out when you did. I'm glad you're doing well. Patricia called me a few months ago, asked why the quality had dropped off. I told her the truth, that you were the talent, and I was just the guy who took credit for it. She said she'd figured that out already. She hired me for a new series, I said. 40 bikes over 2 years. Good. That's what should have happened. He paused. I really am sorry, Daniel. I know, and for what it's worth, I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, but because holding on to anger about it isn't serving me anymore. You made your choices. You're living with the consequences. That's justice enough. More than I deserve. Probably. But that's how forgiveness works. After we hung up, I sat in my workshop for a long time, thinking about friendship and betrayal and the strange arithmetic of justice. Marcus had tried to cheat me, and he'd ended up losing everything. I'd fought back, and I'd ended up exactly where I needed to be. But it wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was something more complicated, a mixture of sadness and relief and acceptance. The revenge I'd enacted wasn't about destroying Marcus. It was about protecting what I valued, about refusing to compromise on the things that mattered most to me. In the end, the best revenge hadn't been watching him fail. It had been succeeding on my own terms. I finished the Vanguard series in November, 2 months ahead of schedule. All 40 bikes, each one unique, each one representing the absolute best work I was capable of. Patricia hosted a gallery showing in downtown Austin, displaying all 40 bikes alongside my design sketches and fabrication photographs. It was part art exhibition, part product launch, and it was packed with collectors, motorcycle enthusiasts, journalists, and industry people. Standing in that gallery, surrounded by the bikes I'd created, I felt a completeness I'd never experienced when I was partnered with Marcus. This was mine. Every weld, every curve, every engineering decision, mine. Not compromised, not diluted, not filtered through someone else's priorities. A journalist from a custom motorcycle magazine approached me near the end of the night. "These are incredible," she said. "How does it feel to be working solo after 7 years of partnership?" I thought about the question carefully before answering. "It feels honest," I said finally. When you're in partnership, you're always negotiating, always compromising, and that can be good. It can push you in directions you wouldn't have gone alone, but it can also dilute your vision, make you doubt your instincts. Working solo, I'm fully responsible for both the successes and the failures, and there's a clarity in that. Do you miss the partnership? I miss the friendship, I admitted. I miss having someone to share the wins with. But I don't miss the conflict between creative vision and business pragmatism. I don't miss defending my artistic choices to someone who fundamentally valued different things. Would you ever partner with someone again? I looked around the gallery at the 40 motorcycles, each one a testament to uncompromising creative vision. Maybe someday, I said, only with someone who understands that the work itself is the point, not the money, not the recognition, not the scale, the work. The journalist smiled. I think you'll find that person eventually. Maybe, but in the meantime, I'm good with it being just me. And I was. I really was. 6 months after the gallery showing, I received a letter from Marcus. Not an email, an actual letter, handwritten on notebook paper. It was short. "Daniel, I'm working at a regular fabrication shop now, learning the craft properly. It's humbling and hard, and I'm the oldest apprentice they've ever had, but I'm learning. I think about what we built together sometimes, and I wish I'd valued it more when I had it. But I'm grateful for what it taught me, even if I had to lose it to learn the lesson. I hope you're well. I hope you're building things that matter. Marcus." I folded the letter and put it in a drawer in my desk. I didn't respond, but I didn't throw it away either. It felt like the right amount of closure, an acknowledgement of what had been, what was lost, and what we'd both learned from the wreckage. My name is Daniel Cortez, and I'm a custom motorcycle fabricator. I build motorcycles from the frame up, one-off machines that blend engineering precision with artistic vision. I learned this craft from my father, who learned it from his father, and I'm carrying it forward into the future on my own terms. I was betrayed by my best friend and business partner. He forged my signature, sold out our shared vision, and tried to cut me out of the thing we'd built together, and I destroyed him for it. Not through violence or public humiliation, but through the simple act of protecting what I valued most. I used my father's legacy as a weapon, turned intellectual property law into a shield, and refused to compromise on my principles, even when it would have been easier to just accept the betrayal and move on. The revenge was complete and devastating. Marcus lost his business, his investment, his reputation. He ended up exactly where I'd started, as an apprentice, learning the craft from the ground up, humbled by the realization that he'd valued the wrong things. But here's what I learned about revenge. It's hollow if it's just about watching someone else suffer. Real justice, meaningful justice, comes from refusing to let betrayal change who you are. It comes from maintaining your integrity, even when doing so costs you something. It comes from building something better out of the rubble of what was destroyed. Marcus tried to turn me into something I wasn't. A businessman who valued profit over craft, scale over quality, quick money over lasting meaning. And by refusing that transformation, by insisting on staying true to what I believed in, I didn't just defeat him, I defeated the version of myself I could have become if I'd let him win. That's the real victory. Not that Marcus failed, but that I didn't. I'm building motorcycles again. Beautiful, complex, uncompromising machines that exist because I believe they should exist, not because market research says they'll sell. I am working with clients who value craftsmanship, who understand that real quality takes time and skill and dedication. I'm making a good living doing work that matters to me. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in the workshop, I think about Marcus. I wonder if he's learned to love the craft the way I do, if he's found satisfaction in the work itself rather than in what the work can get him. I wonder if he's happy working as an apprentice, starting over at 37 years old. I hope he is. Not because I've completely forgiven him. Some betrayals leave scars that never fully heal, but because I've learned that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And I'm not indifferent to Marcus's fate. I spent 7 years building something with him that meant something, even if it ended badly. But I don't need him anymore. I don't need anyone's validation or partnership or approval. I have my craft, my integrity, and my father's legacy. That's enough. More than enough. It's everything.